Good evening y muy buenas noches. My name is Marlene Braga, and I am Vice President of Public Programs for Skirball Cultural Center. We are delighted that you've joined us for a very special evening of conversation. Skirball is a cultural center and museum guided by the Jewish tradition of welcoming the stranger. We present programs, exhibitions, and experiences across all disciplines of artistry. Our objective is to unite one another by sharing stories, and in doing so, creating a more empathetic, hopeful, and just society. One of Skirball's 6 essential values is to seek learning. Tonight, we are honored to explore the vast culinary treasures of America's neighbor and dear friend, Mexico. Leading this conversation is one of that country's shining stars, chef and author Pati Jinich, who just released her new cookbook, Treasures of the Mexican Table. Last Friday, the New York Times lauded Pati's newest body of work as, I quote, dazzling. Joining Pati in conversation tonight is home cook and fellow author Odette Williams. Pati's book is now available online. We will be dropping a link in the chat where you'll find her book available for purchase. In addition, we invite you to ask questions. Just drop them into the Q&A section of Zoom. I'd like to now welcome Pati and Odette.
Thank
Patricia, felicidades.
Thank you.
On your new book. It is outstanding, and welcome, Odette. We're so thrilled to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with Pati.
Thank you so much for having us. And as we were chatting right before we joined officially on screen, we were chatting about how we would love to be there in person with you, Marlene, and we hope to do so soon, if not with one of my cookbooks, with one of Odette's cookbooks. I'm such a fan of Odette's work. And we just love the programming that you all do. It has so much soul and so much mission, and you really can feel it the moment you walk in. And so really delighted to be able to do this with you, because it's incredible when you find collaborators like these where you're really digging deep and you're trying to share substantial content and to really share and build that community, and you all do that so beautifully. So thank you for inviting us in.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. You come from a very special land, very, very special land. Le tengo mucho cariño a México. Bienvenida. And welcome to Odette as well.
Thank you. Well, Pati, I don't even know where to begin, because first I'm going to say I'm hungry, because I've just spent the day thumbing through your gorgeous new book. And I've got to say, having just written a cookbook, I know how much work has gone into this book. It is really like an amazing body of work. And I can just see that there is like a lifetime of work in there.
There is actually, Odette. I feel like it was a very, very ambitious project. I started with a list. You know, in Mexico, it's a universe. It's a universe of possibilities. It's a universe of regional cuisines, because some people say, oh, there's 5 main regions, or there's 32 states, but then you realize there's these micro regions. But aside from, you know, say having a state like Oaxaca, which has like 8 or 9 mini regional cuisines, you have Michoacán that has 3 or 4, but then there are also the historical periods, and then there are the classics, and then there are the new classics, and then you have the dishes that may have started in one state but are now in all the republic, you know, with all the different renditions. And so I feel like when I started, I drove Rox Martin, who is my editor, a little bit crazy. She has worked with me in all my cookbooks, and So I was like, I really want to do a deep dive, but do we go by state? Do we go by region? And so what I started doing all that, which was kind of crazy, is I did a list of the dishes that I wanted to include per state, and starting doing research about them. And I had like 800 possibilities, right? So we knew that the cookbook needed to be like 150 recipes. And I ended up delivering like 220 recipes I just couldn't.
2 books. You delivered 2 books.
Exactly. Then I was thinking, the publisher is going to be so happy because it's, more bang for their buck. And they were like, no, Pati, like there's a certain amount of pages and the book is a certain size. So I think the exercise helped the book because it's more edited, but it was a project that I thought was going to take like 2-3 years, which is the usual for me. I'm a very slow writer. And it ended up taking over 4. I mean, I'm so happy that it's out and I'm so happy that we're sharing it. And I feel like there's so much content in here. But it was a journey. As with your book, it's a difficult journey. But I'm so happy that it's out now.
Yeah, I describe writing a cookbook like running a marathon. It really is this long process. And even if it takes 4 years to write it, it really is your entire history in a book, and it's so interesting you talk about the editing process, because it's so interesting when you think, I'm going to deliver as much as possible because I just want to share everything that I've got here because this is just so amazing and interesting. But I think what you've done really well and what your editor has done really well, the thing that stood out the most for me was I thought, this is a book I'm actually going to cook from. Because I own a couple of titles, Mexican food titles, and they're beautiful. But I'm going to be honest, I've never cooked from them because they're a bit intimidating. And I think that what you did by curating it down is, and even the way that you, like going back to your conversation about how you thought maybe you were going to first structure it around regions and then deciding actually, no, you know what, I'm going to put these in the buckets of, soups and desserts. It just makes it so user-friendly so that, for me, I'm like, okay, great. I've got this. And also too, your voice is so strong in the writing that you really do feel like.
Oh, thank you so much. And that is a difficult thing, Odette, because English is not my first language, as you know, and there's some sayings and slang that you use in Spanish and some sayings and slang that I've grown to use in the US, which is not necessarily the way it's used in the US in the proper way. My kids always called me like, Ma, you think you mean that, but you really meant that. You know what you said was that. And so in working with Rox Martin and with Martha Schulman, who also helped me like clean my English and not have it be like a translation of my Spanish. But at the same time, I really wanted to keep those things because those are the things that define not only me, but Mexicans as we express ourselves outside of Mexico. So I didn't want it to be all like super translated to the point where you lose the Mexican emotion or intention or the immigrant, experience in the US where you are deeply rooted. As you know, I feel we connect so much because you're also not from the US. You feel deeply rooted in your home country. Yeah. And you feel also deeply rooted in the US. And it's that connection. I feel the more I am in the US, the deeper I am rooted to Mexico. But at the same time, I'm growing as deeper roots in the US. And I feel like we have some people think like, oh, that may make you less because you're not of one thing, you're of two.
Mhm.
But I think that just opens a dimension of, building bridges between the two, which is kind of a limbo where more possibilities can exist. So in terms of the food, I really wanted, I mean, what you're saying is music to my ears, because I really wanted each and every recipe to be craved and to be
Yeah.
able to be executed. Because I also have, I mean, I have so many cookbooks. I'm obsessed with cookbooks.
I know. I
And
know.
there are so many cookbooks that you have where you make one or two recipes of the book, and that's it. And
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that people will take a stab at 150 from 150, So it was like that juggling of what do I think people will crave the most in the 200 possibilities of how to present potatoes from different regional ways. I was like, okay, I'm going to make that a potato cake because it's
Yeah, no, I thought that was so, I've never seen anything like that in my life. I was so impressed. I was very intrigued by that. So guys, you have to buy the book because Patti has done this amazing thing where she has made this potato, I'm just going to call it a bundt cake. It's like it is this bundt, but I never would have thought to do something savory in a bundt pan. So I just thought that was like so clever and so just so original in its like thinking and presentation, and I bet you the exterior is so crisp and delicious because of the what the bundt pan does with the metal. I mean, and oh god, yum, with a bit of
and
like,
it is so inside you have the mashed potatoes that are cheesy but also kind of souffle, and this thing, trying to shine a light on how much more than tacos we have, But of course, the irony is like all of us Mexican cooks, we're always trying to show how, I think I can speak for many of my peers, we're like, we have salads, we have vegetables, we have so many incredible soups, we have all of these things. Like, don't just think about us in terms of tacos, but in the end, we want to taco everything,
Well, I love how you said, think of taco as a verb, and that you basically want to taco everything. And I actually think that that's such a great approach.
Taco the soup, you want to taco the potato crown, you want to because you can,
Yeah. But actually, speaking of the soups, the one that, I mean, I actually traveled through Mexico with my mother about 20 years ago. I flew up from Sydney, Australia.
And your mom is Australian too.
She's Australian. We flew into Mexico City, and then we traveled down and then down onto the Yucatan, and then we flew from the Yucatan up to Guadalajara and then came down. And so for me, what I found myself today doing is I was Googling places in Mexico. I mean, I feel like I've seen quite a lot of Mexico, but I was Googling these places that I had not been to, or hadn't heard of. And I feel like that's where you did so well too, with the weaving in the history or the background of the food culturally, and then bringing it into like the contemporary kitchen.
I was trying to do all of that. I was really trying to make the food so mouth-watering, but so accessible and so easy. And I really was hoping that people were going to do what you're saying, like not knowing what to choose what I'm going to cook tonight. Not only these one or two things, but also it was very funny, Odette, because when we were talking about the title of the cookbook, since the beginning, when I was talking with Rox, I was telling her we need to call the book Tesoro. Tesoro is the translation for treasures in Spanish. And tesoro, I feel, is a beautiful word because you use tesoro in Mexican slang a lot to call things that you love. Your kids are your tesoros. Like the beautiful sunshine is at Tesoro this morning. You know, it's
Mm.
but Tesoro has a lot of depth and meaning, and I really wanted to create a cookbook that had so many of Mexico's treasures that went beyond the dish, but that it also shared the treasure of the story behind, you know, so
Mhm.
that when you make that dish, hopefully, I find that we find so much meaning when we're around the table and we're in the kitchen, especially with COVID. I think people really got to know their kitchens much.
Oh yeah.
much
It was like dishwasher abuse.
oh my gosh, I know. In the beginning, I was like, fine, I want to make this an exercise. And then at some point, I was like, I do not want to wash a single dish anymore.
I know.
Please, let's do takeout. But I feel like I wanted to make it possible for people to bring new dishes to their table, but also to
Mhm.
be able to share those stories, so that this book would not only bring you the food, but the stories and the curiosity to think, oh, I learned something new about Mexico, or something new about people, or something new about me, you know? It
Yeah.
The irony of it all is I finished this cookbook. I did so much research, you know, aside from all the travel I had been doing. And oh my gosh, I'm telling you, I had like thousands of possible recipes and read, you know, the legends behind them and the stories behind them. And I tested so many wonderful things and so many horrific things and so many, you know, it's so
Yeah.
incredible. But in the end, I feel like it was the most incredible and humbling experience, because
Mhm.
I learned so much. And at the
Mhm.
same time, I realized I knew so little. And then
Mhm.
at the end of learning more, it's like I realized I know less. I know it
Mhm.
sounds weird, but it just
Mhm.
made me realize how little I know, you know,
Mhm.
how much there is to know, how much I wasn't able to include,
I think
everything that was left out, you know?
I think a lot of cookbook authors feel that, honestly. I think that we go through this phase where you realize that, because we often do these deep dives on these subjects, you know, for a particular book. And then you realize, once you go in that deep dive, oh my goodness, like I need to learn so much more, even though you already have an arsenal of knowledge. And I
Yes.
think that's just curiosity that also, you know, just means that you don't take for granted that you know everything, you know, and that you can't possibly fit it all in one book, you know, that this is why they become these focused subjects, and that people can then access when they open it up. They can decide, okay, I'm going to cook this, and here's a little narrative, here's a little story. And I love the way that they did the sidebars in the book, because I do think that that was like really helpful for giving the recipes context. So if I wanted to be cooking the recipe, or if I just wanted to have my eye kind of wander over to hear the backstory, it's there for me. It's really like beautifully laid out and designed.
Aw, thank you.
But so Patty, tell me about growing up in Mexico City, and tell me about your Jewish heritage growing up in Mexico.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. And I think someone here, I think the first or second question we had from,
Yeah, I think Bess here has also asked about
yeah,
the Jewish background.
yeah. So I love talking about that. It's been another journey for me, you know, being a Mexican Jew. I remember when I moved to Texas, when I first got married, as if I got married a second time with my husband. I've only been married once.
Yeah, just
Eh,
once.
and he knows I'm not doing it again, so he has to stick with me.
Yeah. Yeah, they're stuck with us.
But when we moved to Dallas, I remember that people just first of all, you know, it's Dallas, it's Texas, and it was a shock for me because I had never lived in the U.S. and I spoke horrible English. I couldn't even string a sentence together. And Dallas in Texas felt so similar to Mexico, but not, like
Mhm.
the sky, the environment, like I could hear Spanish, but it's like not the Mexican accents that I was used to. The food, it's like you went into restaurants that said authentic Mexican, but it was fully Tex-Mex. I mean, I've come to love Tex-Mex, but it was not the Mexican that I grew up eating. And when people heard me speak, like they would say, "Oh, you're not from here. Where are you from?" And I would ask them, guess. They would guess everything. I mean, that they would say Australia before they said Mexico. It was like France, Poland, Argentina. Like last was Mexico. And then when I said Mexico, it was like, oh. And then when they heard my last name, it was like Jewish, like they just couldn't put Mexico and Jewish together at all.
Yeah.
And the history of Jews in Mexico is really long. It goes really deep and goes really back. Jews arrived in Mexico in the 1500s with the Spanish conquerors because they were fleeing Spain. And some that were forced to convert found a way to just get out of Spain then. And since then, there have been different immigration waves, mostly, as most Jews do, fleeing from something, like a pogrom, the Second World War, the First World War, either political or religious persecution, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
But I mean, when it comes to the population of Jews in the world, I don't know exactly how many Jews there are in the world, maybe 6 million, I'm not sure, but there's 50,000 in Mexico, which, Mexico is a country of 130 million maybe, so it's a really tiny community. But for
That's actually what I was shocked at when I read that number today, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is tiny.
Yeah, but when you think about the percentage compared to Jews in the world,
Mhm.
it's considerable. But
Mhm.
I didn't grow up within the Jewish community. My parents were kind of outsiders, so they didn't put me and my sisters in Jewish school. We didn't go to a JCC. We, like, all that we did in terms of traditions and religion was with my grandparents, like for Friday Shabbats or high holidays. So I grew up being one of two Jews. I think I spoke about these the last time I was at this Skirball, which was a fascinating conversation. Um, I grew up being one of two Jews, in school. And so I always felt like everybody went to church. I played Virgin Mary in school in 5th grade. My grandmother almost died, when she came to see me at the play. So I grew up going to church with my nana. And so I always felt like I could happily tread the two when I was growing up because I experienced both with food, right? So I could do the Mexican Jewish in my grandparents, for high holidays or Shabbat. And the food is absolutely fascinating, Odette. It's not like you throw a chile pepper in a matzo ball soup. I mean, there's centuries of this food in the making. So it's Veracruz style gefilte fish. It's matzo ball soups with steamed mushrooms and cilantro and jalapeno. And not only the Ashkenazi or Eastern European Jewish foods, but also the Sephardic or Middle Eastern food. Just tonight for dinner, we had these incredibly delicious, and these didn't even go in the cookbook. It's in Mexico, there's this thing that the Jewish Arab communities make, the communities of Jews that come from Syria and Lebanon, where they mix ground lamb with tamarind syrup and rehydrated ancho chiles and a combination of onion, herbs, tomato, bell peppers, lots of spices, and then you spread I mean, just think about like the combination of tamarind, ancho chile, jalapeno. I mean, and then you spread that on a pita and you put that in the oven, and then you dress that with guacamole and tuna, and it's insane. And and that's just one example of a Mexican Jewish recipe.
I'm such a lamb lover, and it was my biggest lament when I came to America from Australia, because traditionally Australians would have a roast leg of lamb every Sunday. So I grew up with lamb, and then when I came to America, I realized like how, you know, beef really is the prime meat, and that lamb is, that a lot of my friends, new American friends, didn't like lamb, and yet I think it's one of the most flavorful, wonderful meats. And
I agree. And Mexicans feel you, because we love lamb, we love goat.
yes,
There's like birria, barbacoa, like all of those are in here.
yeah.
No, I agree. Beef is just one meat in Mexico, right? Yeah, but anyway, in regards to the
sorry, I got you off track with the lamb.
It's fascinating, because when you think about like other things that came from the Middle East that came with lamb, like the pastor or the Arab tacos that you eat in Puebla, which are here too.
I know, and actually what I didn't realize is when I was reading the book about the Lebanese community in Merida.
Yes.
And so I got even that. I was like, I've been to that town, and I feel like now I need to just go back and...
You need to go again.
I need to go again.
They make the most incredible kipe. Truly.
I love, oh my goodness.
Yes. Of course, because, you know, Yucatan, they raise a lot of pork. So they make the kipe with pork in the Yucatan with a lot of mint and cilantro.
Yeah.
It's so delicious. But, you know, it definitely has been a personal journey, because I took for granted the Mexican Jewish food as something that I just grew up with. And when I jumped into food, I married my husband. I was an academic, wanted to be an academic. I did political science. I worked as a political analyst and just kept on eating this food as my family food. But when I switched to food and started giving classes of Mexican cooking, which I felt was my thing, you know, I'm a Mexican. This is what I know. This is what I love. This is what I miss. And people started asking me for Mexican Jewish food really early on. And I would be like, why? You know, why do you want to know Mexican Jewish if, you know, we need to explore like the 32 states and then whatever, you know? And as the years have gone by, I have realized the depth of it and how it is a reflection of things we have to learn about Mexican cooking. Because when people think about Mexican culture and cuisine, and not only outside of Mexico, inside of Mexico, or that we are taught in Mexico that we are the result of old world, new world, meaning Spanish and native Mexican tribes. And history and the education of our country just forgot to include, or just didn't include, Africans, Syrians, Lebanese, Asians, Jews. And Mexico is a much more diverse place than people think. So you have the Middle Eastern food combined with Mexican food from the Jewish community, but also not from the Jewish community. So another example of a Middle Eastern Mexican is Salma Hayek. Her family comes from the Middle East, and the food that community eats has much more in common with the Middle Eastern Jews, you know? So anyway, it's just really fascinating. And when adding the recipes in here, I had this lamb that I told you about that we just had for dinner tonight. My boys love it. And now I'm like, why didn't I include it?
No.
You know, but it's these things. You have a certain amount of lamb, a certain amount of chicken, a certain amount of beef. So you have to balance it out. But so for people asking about the Mexican Jewish thing, it's definitely been a journey for me. And it got even more complicated when I moved to the US, because then now I'm not only a Mexican Jew, but now I have Mexican American Jewish kids. So then throw the American in there after living here for 20 years. And I realized that really cooking in the kitchen is the most wonderful place to be and to understand all of your pieces. And we all have our different pieces.
Well, I think it sounds like, just from hearing you talk there, I feel like just recently I've been grappling a lot with where is home. And this year, for the first time, I went for my citizenship. And it was just one of those big moments where you realize, I wasn't born here. I was born in Australia, but both my children were born here, and I've raised my kids here. And it sounds like we've both found home in the kitchen. We've both, in foreign countries, found some kind of comfort or umbilical cord back to our past through food. And I think that I now understand, like, because Australia has a similar background with immigrants, and we have a very multicultural society. We have the Lebanese and the Greeks and the Italians. And then because of our proximity to Asia, we have Thai and Malaysian and Chinese. And I think that having lived away from Australia, and I'm guessing for you from Mexico, is that you can now understand why holding up these traditions, or you looking at where you've come from, as being far more important to kind of celebrate. You know, especially when for me, I'm so far from Australia, and with COVID, I haven't been able to go for so long that I think cooking is a way to really bring home to you when it's far away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I actually started cooking because I was so homesick. Odette, I was a terrible cook when I got married. I mean, I've always been a spectacular eater.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I joke, I say, I wake up and I think, not what's for breakfast, what's for dinner. I'm like, yeah.
It's very funny because I have 3 older sisters, and my father is very tall and big, and he's a really big eater. And my sisters always used to like reprimand me, like, Patty, you can't eat as much as Papi. You know, I was like 8 years old and I was eating the same amount of food as my father. I have this gigantic appetite, and I love flavors. I love eating. And even when I got married, I remember I got married, we moved to Dallas. I didn't know how to cook, but like a couple quesadillas or scrambled eggs. And it's because I was so homesick and so nostalgic. And I didn't speak the language, didn't know anybody. My husband was traveling like a madman then. He would go for 2-3 weeks at a time. And I was, you know, in our duplex, writing my thesis, trying to be an academic, not knowing how to cook. And I remember that going to the supermarket and meeting people who spoke Spanish, I would say, you know, what are you going to use those jalapenos for? How do you make your rice? How do you make your beans? Started calling my sisters. And it was a way for me to feel at home and to start growing roots here, because I felt so rootless, you know? And the funny thing I was going to tell you is when my mom first came to visit after a year that we were here, because after we moved here, in order for me to have my working papers, I couldn't travel back to Mexico until I had those. So there's a time where you're like in limbo when you're applying for working papers or the green card, where you can't go back and forth. And so I couldn't go back to Mexico. My mom came to visit, and by the time she came to visit, I had been here for a year. So I was already cooking, right? And I was cooking a lot of food. And my mom, you know, she always eats her special things, like her vegetables or her whatever. She tries to eat very healthy, and I just eat everything, you know? And so she would come to the table, she would have her salad or whatever it is she was eating. And then for whatever I was making for dinner, when my husband came home, I would split it in 2, half for you, half for me. And my husband is like 3 heads taller. He weighs like double than I do. And every night my mom would say, you just can't do that, Patty. Like, but anyway, to this day, he has to fight for his share. But so I was not a good cook, and it was only because cooking made me feel like home that and then it went from, oh, cooking makes me feel at home, and cooking makes me feel like I can nurture my husband, or if I'm lonely, or if he's sick, or this is the way we know how to heal. And then it became a way for me to showing people who we were, right? When we were having guests over, or people from his job or neighbors, it was a way for us to show who we were through food, because honestly, my English was absolutely a disaster.
Well, I feel like in a way, Patty, your work has actually gone on to have even more significance outside of the personal experience, because I feel like what this book does and what your shows have, and particularly your most recent show is doing, is that it's kind of debunking these kind of like monoculture myths that have kind of, I think it's actually what your book does so well too, is like it says Mexican food isn't just one thing, you know, and I think that like, I think your work has actually gone on to have a much bigger influence over just the perception of particularly what's politically gone on in the last little while. I think that the timing of your show and this book is really impeccable.
I have to say, and I know that somebody asked us about La Frontera in the chat.
Yes, they said, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I've been wanting to go to the border with the show for such a long time, precisely because, you know, treading back and forth from Mexico to the US and trying to build, you know, bridges even with food, or translating, but increasingly rather than translating, I realized, because in the beginning, when I started the show, Patty's Mexican Table, over 10 years ago, it was a completely different panorama. I remember when I started the show, there was no Mexican doing Mexican food. There was just not. And it was really hard to have, you know, to get the pilot approved and then the show approved. There was always the concern that people wouldn't understand my accent, or that Mexican food was too ethnic. And I feel like we've come afar, you know, we've come a long way, but in that back and forth, where in the beginning it was like, let me explain to you what I miss about Mexico and what we are and what people don't know about those. It's come to, I'm bringing the microphone down there and I'm letting people say, and the audience and the panorama has changed so much that today we were able to do something that we couldn't do before. You know, now the show has full segments where I'm in conversations in full-blown Spanish with people, and there's subtitles in English. You couldn't do that 10 years ago. And with La Frontera, it was, you know, this magnet that I needed to go to La Frontera. I knew so many people from El Paso, and I get so many emails from viewers from El Paso, and they are the nicest, warmest, Odette, always asking me, come to La Frontera, come to the border. And I had gone to a few places at the border. I had gone to the Nogales, I had gone to Laredo, I had gone to San Diego, Tijuana, but I've never been at El Paso or Brownsville or McAllen. And I realized that if I thought there were myths and preconceptions about Mexicans, and I wanted to shine a light on how rich and diverse Mexico is, I mean, myths and preconceptions at the border are even more narrow, even more vicious. And so I really wanted to get there and just bring the microphone and have a slice of their pie and eat it and share it with the audience without an agenda. We didn't go down there thinking this is what we want to show, other than we want to show everything that there is. You know, we want to show the diversity, we want to show the richness, we want to show everything that the news outlets don't show. Which people down there are so tired of, because people go to the border, capture content, and then just share a tidbit of what they want to be said. And here it was, okay, we're eating with people, we're traveling with people, we're watching sports with people, we're singing with people, we're just living life, because people dehumanize a place. And the food is so phenomenal, by the way.
Oh my God, the food! I was watching the show and I once again hungry. It's just the food looked so good, and just your enthusiasm for food is just so infectious. Like it's just so wonderful. But I think it is so important, because really, it's just putting a camera and a microphone up to an area that people maybe may never travel, so I think it's just so important. And it's the same for your book. You might never make it to Mexico, to some of these areas, but via your recipes, via your book, you can have a little taste of it. So you've just done so well, Patti.
Thank you. So for La Frontera, we did half of the border. We did the Texas-Mexico border. So we went from El Paso to Brownsville. So next year, I want to do the other half of the border, which goes from Tijuana to El Paso. And I have to tell you, it was so incredibly humbling. I don't know what other word to say. When you think about the Texas-Mexico border, even in terms of food, and you think, oh, it's all going to be one kind of Tex-Mex food or another, which is what people tend to think. But no. I mean, just within Tex-Mex, the regional and micro-regional differences are so immense. I mean, a taco in Brownsville has nothing to do with a taco in El Paso. A burrito, a menudo, a pozole, de carne asada. And it's really, it was really fascinating to realize, 20 years ago or less, people were complaining about how Tex-Mex is a bastardization of Mexican food, fake Mexican food, washed out Mexican food. And Tex-Mex is really its own regional, beautiful beast. And it's evolving, and it keeps adding a bigger accent on the mix, the more Mexican communities are there and the more ingredients are available. And oh my God, the fajitas I had, the burritos I had were unbelievable.
I know, some of those burritos, just even the scale of the burrito was like, oh goodness, it just looked so delicious.
Yeah, it is like those, when you go to a special sushi place and they give you the roll at the end, I forget the name of it. It is as delicate as that. It's like a homemade, fresh made flour tortilla that puffs, and then one filling, but it is like the most exquisite feeling that can totally stand on its own.
Yeah.
And you want to dip it in a little salsa, it's fine, but you realize how even the burritos, the farther away you get from the border, the bigger the misconception, the bigger the burrito.
Yes.
And like, there's nothing wrong with those gigantic burritos. Listen, like, I will devour them. Yeah. But it's just like knowing that there's different kinds.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I when I was watching that episode and you came out with these lovely little burritos, and they were just like more like crepes, like it was
exactly.
I was just immediately wanted to be eating them.
I know, they were so incredible, and people were so welcoming and warm and lovely, and you really make good friends. They're it's people that give you their heart. It's people that want to connect, that want to be understood, that want to be listened to, and they open up their homes like, please, really beautiful.
Oh, you're so warm and lovely. No wonder they open up to you. It's your,
Well,
you're just
you're
like,
the same. So when I come to the border again, you're welcome to come with me.
I'm coming. I'm tagging along. I'll hold the. I'll hold the mic. But actually, you know what? I was thinking of questions I wanted to ask you, and actually, this one's not specifically related to the book, but I'm curious to know, and I'm sure like a lot of other people are, is like you're a powerhouse, because I know how hard it is and how involved it is to write a book. And on top of writing a book, you have 3 children and you're doing this show as well. So I was curious to know how you juggle all of that.
You know, I don't. It's kind of scary, but there's just things that you end up sacrificing. You can't, it's a myth. It's you can't have it all. You just can't. And I don't, my days are not balanced. You know, I just went with my sister Sharon to a trip to Oaxaca a few months ago. And she was appalled. She was like, Pati, do you really start your days like these? Like straight to working, straight to the. She's like, take a breath, like make a green juice, like think about, you know. And I realized you become like these, you know, and I'm trying to make an effort to slow down a little and catch my breath. And it's just that I want to do so much, right? Like I want to go to the other side of the border and I want to share the other recipes and I want to go to, you know, another region of Pati's Mexican table. And so for example, I don't see many friends that much because it's like work and it's family and you know, people think that I'm incredibly social, which I love people, but I'm like social when I'm filming, when I'm traveling. So I make friends with the people I'm filming with and with the people I'm traveling. But you know, I don't see friends that much, which I miss. I don't go back to Mexico to see my family that much, which I should. I should exercise more, which I don't. So no balance here. No balance. A lot of coffee for sure.
I know. I totally get it. I think when you I understand and have the same feeling about time often, that you know you feel like you want to get a lot done and there's only so many hours in the day. And it is a juggle. All right, so Pati, you know what we need to do? We need to cut to some questions because I realize we've only got 10 minutes. So, all right, so here we go. We have actually this is a great question because this is what I loved about the book, about the moles. It says here, I would like to learn to make a good mole. Do you have a good recipe? Also, is mole different in regions?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm looking here for a photo. There are as many mole recipes as cooks. Even in Oaxaca, which is supposed to be the land of the 7 moles, no. There's like dozens and dozens of moles. And most people know the mole poblano, which I included here because I feel it's a must. It's the mole that most people know. But for example, I'm fascinated with these mole now. Odette, you have to make these. It is a wedding. It's called a bride's mole because it connects to the idea of the white dress. So it is a mole that is very pale in color, and it uses pine nuts and apple and banana and blonde chiles, you know, the banana peppers to have that color. And it has it's from the central region of Mexico, and they used to make it for moles. They still do, not that often. Now it's more like a specialty dish, but that's where the name comes from. And the flavor is so delicate. The taste is so velvety. It is It is one of the most incredible things I've ever tried, and there are many renditions of it. So for all of these dishes, I try to taste as much as I can. I try to get as much information as to what are the best techniques, what are the best ingredients, and then I come, to my kitchen and try all the possible ways. I'll have 6, 7 pots when I have my notes and I have my computer to see what works best. And this mole is really like a magic potion. And I serve it here with a veal chop, but you could do this with lamb chops. Because I know you like that.
The pine nuts with the lamb would be so delicious.
Yeah, and then there's green mole, which I also have an incredibly delicious green mole here that has pork and white beans. So there are, you could do an encyclopedic cookbook on moles, and you would be having like at least 200 really solid ones that people can make now with the ingredients they find in the US. So mole is really like the poblano, that chocolatey sauce one is to die for, but that's just one of so many.
Yeah, I thought that was what was great in the cookbook. When you buy the cookbook, guys, you'll see that there's a real breakdown of mole, so that it's not just one thing.
Yeah. It's like soups or salsas,
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of salsas, in the book, guys, there's an amazing, so I love how Patti is all about the condiment, because I'm all about the condiment as well. So salsas and condiments and how they're like adding character to the dish. I just love that. All right. So Patti, all right, let's go to another question. Okay. What was the field that you studied in?
I studied political science in a university called ITAM in Mexico City. And I wanted to be an academic, and I worked in a policy research center, specializing in doing research on the strengthening of democratic institutions in Mexico. And then after I moved to the US, I did a master's in Georgetown here in Washington, D.C. I got a merit scholarship because I worked so hard on Latin American studies. And there I started focusing on the US-Mexico relations and the Mexican migrant communities in the US and the strengthening of civic culture. And then I resigned. And then I had an existential crisis and thought, I just want to cook.
But it's funny, all that part of your work is still present in your food work. You haven't lost it. It's just it's iterated. It's become something else. Yeah. This is a really good question, because this says, what dessert recipe do you think everyone should try? And look. How can you go past the flan or the coconut rice pudding?
Oh, I know.
Or the burnt milk ice cream.
Oh, that is ridiculous. That ice cream is ridiculous. But I have to tell you, my favorite from this book is these. These cookies are insane.
Oh, God.
These cookies, these cookies are insane.
Yeah, I'd take 10 of them.
With the sugar crystals, and then in the middle you can do cajeta or dulce leche. And so inside, the cookies start soaking a little bit of that dulce de leche, but the top gets crunchy. Those cookies are ridiculous. But I agree, it's hard to choose. I have a Day of the Dead bread there that is truly insane.
Yeah,
I have a great Rosca de Reyes, because Rosca de Reyes, the Three Kings bread, it's coming in January. For those who celebrate or those who don't, that is a great bread to make.
Yeah, actually, the bread looked very, very good in the book. Let me tell you, the dessert section is you're going to be torn in what to cook. Yeah, I was like, I nearly ran down, and I wondered if I had time to make the flan before this talk tonight. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm such a sucker for a flan. Oh, and I've never made one with cream cheese in it before. So you have to try it. It makes it so rich. Oh,
creamy. Yeah.
oh, I can imagine. And because condensed milk's one of my favorite things of all time. And then
Mine too.
when you put it with the texture of flan, I'm like, oh, I cannot wait.
Yeah.
All right, what else have we got here question-wise? Probably can fit in one more. Okay, so are any of the resources for cooking for the Mexican Jewish community? I'd like to understand, for example, what Mexican Jews eat at Passover.
I have so many recipes on my website too. So for Passover, for example, we do, of course, the matzo ball soup, which somebody was asking over there, what's like my favorite Mexican Jewish thing to make. I love making matzo balls so much that my kids have grown tired of them. I make matzo balls and I have the recipe on my website, patijinich.com. And what I do with it though, and I just get the matzo ball mix from the store, and I just add, I combine vegetable oil with toasted sesame oil, and I add nutmeg. So it makes the matzo balls have this kind of toasty, nutty, like depth of flavor. And it's just so nurturing. I think I love that. And as far as resources, really, you can find everything you need these days. I mean, that I feel like there's no excuse for any cuisine. Middle Eastern, Asian, Australian, it's really hard to find ingredients that you can find with a click of an online button.
I think also, guys, Patti in the book does break down like a lot of if you don't know where to get ingredients, she's got some, great recommendations. And if you can't get one thing, there's like a substitute for something else. So you're totally covered. And then even breaks down like the different types of chilies, and it's a really, like you won't be lost at all. You'll have lots of options.
And somebody's asking, what can they do with guajillo peppers? What can you not do with guajillo peppers? You can make salsas, you can make marinades, you can make adobos. There's so many recipes in this book that use guajillo peppers.
It says here, what is your favorite Jewish food to make besides the matzo balls?
I think what I just made last night, because my kids just adore it, but it's not in this cookbook. So that means I'm going to have to write another one.
Patti, you're going to have to start on book number 4.
Exactly.
Tomorrow.
My husband will divorce me, Odette.
All right. It's a special treat. Maybe she could share that lamb recipe with us.
I know.
It's coming in book 4. It's coming in book 4, you guys. You're going to have to be patient, because in the meantime, we've got 150 amazing recipes. Oh, and actually, Patti, the one that stood out that I cannot wait to cook is the Sonoran shrimp and scallop. Oh, that
is so good. That is absolutely insane. You're going to love that.
Yeah. So guys, basically I know what I'm going to cook from. I'm going to cook that, and I'm going to cook the flan, and maybe the coconut rice pudding as well.
Yes. You're going to love that tostada. When you make them, let me know.
Oh, the crunchy and the soft and the citrus and
the mayo in the bottom.
Oh, I'm so there for that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think we might be out of time.
I think we are. And this has been too much fun. And I'm so grateful that you joined me in this conversation. I've been following your work for such a long time. You're such a pleasure to follow on Instagram. You guys, you have to find Odette on Instagram. You are so funny. You have such a great sense of humor, and your content is gorgeous. And I can't wait until we meet in person. And
me too, Patti.
I love what you do, truly. I'm a big fan of your work. So thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Patti, and congratulations on all your success. It's so well deserved, and this book is so wonderful, and the show is wonderful, and I feel like the star is rising for you, Patti, and it's so richly deserved, and all the hard work is paying off. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I have to say, ladies, I feel as though we've time traveled in just 1 hour through all 32 Mexican states, across the Jewish diaspora, Middle East, making a pit stop in Spanish colonialism, then roaring across the US-Mexican border straight into our hearts. What a conversation.
Oh.
Odette, you so wisely said that our yearning for home is often alleviated through food. Patti, we are so grateful to you for showing us the way home.
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
Mil gracias. Mil gracias. Thank you as well to Odette Williams and to our audience. Look for treasures of the Mexican table, and most important, have a safe, happy, peaceful holiday season. I have a really good feeling about 2022. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night. Blessings. Bendiciones. Órale pues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.